Hey folks, Curtis Stone here. Today we are going to be continuing our video series where we look at all the US states and all the Canadian provinces and giving you food for thought for each of them, places that you might consider and places that you might want to avoid. Today we're going to be looking at the state of Oklahoma and looking at some of the places down here that you might want to consider. I would say in general, when it comes to Oklahoma, there's a good side and a bad side, just like there is in the state of Texas. If you've ever flown an airplane over this area, it is quite desolate here. It is low populated, which isn't a bad thing, but it's low populated for a reason, is that it's dry and it's harsh, and there are tornadoes and things like that to consider there, Tornado Alley being one of them. And so there's a lot of places in the state that you want to avoid. So let's just take a look at those places here. So we've got our no-go zone cities. So let's just zero in on those. We've got the big cities that we want to avoid: Oklahoma City, Tulsa, and maybe Fort Smith. You know, we put down a generic 50-mile radius with these, and so it doesn't really matter. It matters the details of it, because sometimes I'm just going to get rid of these roads. Sometimes these cities aren't so big, but we just kind of put this down generically. I would say Oklahoma City is a massive. I would avoid that, partially because the climate over on this side is not good, but this is a big city. There's a ton of concrete there. There's just a lot of BS there that you don't need. Tulsa's a fairly big city too. This area, I would definitely avoid this. But, living on the outer regions of this might not necessarily be a bad thing. And then Fort Smith, this is a lot less of a populated area. So, if you're in this area in here, it's not the worst. But again, we just put this down as a general consideration on where to avoid. Now, places that are good in Oklahoma are all the places in the green areas, high and dry, out of the Tornado Alley, outside of the major metropolitan areas. And in this zone here, I've talked about this in previous videos, but in general, this geographical region here that is east of the west of the Mississippi, crosses a few different states. This is a really good zone in general. So we have a bit of Louisiana, a bit of Arkansas, a bit of Missouri, a bit of Oklahoma, and a bit of eastern Texas. This is a good area. It's green. It's lower populated. There's water. You're on the high ground. It's pretty good. So these areas that we could consider have some amenities, right? We've got some smaller towns. We've got things that we need, but we could tuck up into some of these. Look at the topography. Isn't it just interesting? How did that get made? I can't get my head around it. But anyways, it's really neat. And there's lots of good places that you could live in this area. I would definitely, if I was looking at an area like this, I would be more partial to being up here in the mountains. These are low mountains, and they're not like mountains of British Columbia that I have, but they are, up and out of the way. I would be more partial to being on the edges of these peri-urban areas here and more into the rural areas, which is where the trees are, and we've got, a little bit less government infrastructure, less roads, less concrete in general. And this is a small town, so, you're close to a town like this. As long as you're not on the major interstates, you're good. So that's a good spot. Down here, another spot, similar scenario. Probably wouldn't want to be in the river valley. That's just where you've got big ag, flood zones and such. So I'd want to be a little bit out of there, but I'd want to be up in these zones here, the green zones. I would avoid these sort of low-lying agricultural areas. I'd want to be on the edge of that, if anything. Right? So it's all about being where the green stuff is. That's where you want to be. You want to be near the trees. The trees do so much for us. They shade us during the hot days. They provide a shelter belt, so less wind. They're amazing. Trees are good. You want to be where there's lots of trees. And so here around this lake, it's probably a beautiful area. And so, you know, we've got trees in here. This is probably beautiful country out in here. One thing you want to watch out for in Oklahoma, it's the same as in Arkansas, is you do have a lot of animal-based CAFOs, so caged animal feeding operations. You want to avoid those if you see them. You know, basically, you know, hacked or just stacked and packed chicken farms. You know, you see that a lot in these regions. You get it in Arkansas too, even in some of these really rural areas of Arkansas, you'll just see these gross chicken farms. So you want to avoid those. Then they're just big, you know, big rectangular shapes that you'll see from the topographic maps. Coming up here, bordering up into Kansas, you're going to find, you know, a bit more rural areas in here. This is good. This is tucked away. But definitely I'd want to be more where the trees are in the higher ground and less in these just quarter section blocked out, you know, peri-urban farming areas. I wouldn't want to be in there. But I would imagine, you know, sometimes in the US, especially in these areas, being close to another state isn't necessarily a bad thing. It gives you some flexibility, maybe it gives you some purchasing options for materials and things like that. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. Another spot might be, you know, in here where you could be going into Missouri, you could be going into Arkansas really quickly. And it's this sort of Ozark region, you know, this touches a few different states. It touches Oklahoma, it touches Missouri, it touches Arkansas, even comes down into parts of Texas and Louisiana. So it's a beautiful region. Just don't be too close to the Mississippi. That's the key. But yeah, as far as Oklahoma is concerned, I would pretty much disregard the entire western side of the state, as I would for Kansas, this part of Colorado, this, you know, New Mexico is a tough one. We will look at all of the states though. So yeah, that's what I would say about Oklahoma. And any of these places we've picked are outside of the FEMA regions. So any of these zones here are going to be outside of Tornado Alley. You know, the tornado risk is going to be in these areas here, the more open and exposed areas. Whereas where you get into more treed areas, you're going to see a lot less radical weather activity. And so, yeah, let me know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments what state you want me to do next. We are going to do all of them, but we actually pick the ones I'm going to do next based on your guys' comments. So if you want to see me do more of this stuff and learn to do some of the stuff that I'm showing you, check out my free web class. There'll be a link in this video. I'm going to show you 3 secrets to finding a really ideal homestead property and kind of give you a basis framework on which you can apply. And I'll show you some stuff with Google Earth and some of the basic techniques that I use. So go check that out there. We'll see you guys in the next one.